Here we go, recording.
Brilliant. So I'll make a start. So welcome to everyone who is joining us live, and welcome to everyone who is watching back on our support site. And a special welcome to my colleague Jane, and Jane's going to be in the
Morning.
wings and looking at the chat. And a special welcome to Karen Hussey of AG Down Funeral Directors. And I'll ask Karen to give a bit of an introduction in a moment. I just wanted to kind of mention my bias. So my bias is that I'm employed by MuchLoved, and also my bias is based on my experience of working in the funeral profession some time ago. So I was a funeral director for about 12 years, and I started off in a corporate company and then moved to an independent company. So both of those will have different attitudes towards connecting with charities. So the reason that I'm mentioning that is that I will have a different view to Karen, and I know that there are probably some charity folk who have a background in funerals as well. So I know that funeral people sometimes hop over into the charity sector, and so your views are very, very valid. But I just wanted to be upfront and say that this is obviously quite biased, and to be open. So don't necessarily believe everything that I say. I just wanted to give Karen a space to say hello and share a tiny bit about her before we start.
Hello, yes, thank you very much for having me. My name is Karen, and as Jason said, I'm a funeral director. I've been a funeral director for over 30 years, and as a family, myself, my husband, 2 children, we have 6 funeral homes on the East Devon, West Dorset border. My slight bias, which I'll declare, we're very heavily involved in the NAFD. I sit on the Committee for Complaints and I'm an examiner and Devon Area President. And my husband is on the NAFD exec and Western Counties president. So we're very involved in that side of it. And we've been with MuchLoved since the very, very beginning days. And we've grown with them and love working in partnership with them.
Super, thank you, Karen. So first of all, how do MuchLoved work with the funeral sector? So we have over 2,000 physical funeral director sites who work with MuchLoved. And I just wanted to show you an example of a funeral director's website to show you. Can you see this website here, Jane? Karen? You can? Okay, so when you go to funeral notices just here, the upcoming funerals and the recent funerals are being listed on their website. So sometimes you'll hear MuchLoved people referring to tribute pages and funeral notices. So that the term funeral notices tends to be the funeral term, and funeral notices historically used to be outside the funeral director's premises. So they would display their upcoming funerals, and quite a few funeral directors still do that. And I think, Karen, that's something that you do. So funeral directors are using us to display their upcoming funerals digitally on their website, and people can go along and they can click on the service details. A lot of funeral people get calls saying, what's the postcode for the crematorium? And you can give them the postcode for the crematorium, and you can also say, oh, by the way, you can go to our website and you can print off the details there. And also people will call up saying, I'd like to make a donation, and people can be signposted to the website to make a donation. They can also be signposted to the website from the back of the printed order of service. It might be that there's a QR code on the back there that people can follow, and they might do that when they're at home after the funeral, after the reception afterwards. So it's also really good for funeral businesses to increase their awareness in terms of brand awareness for everyone there. So the immediate family will probably know who it is that's carrying out the funeral, but the other mourners might not know. And then I wanted to show you a bit of your partner area. So this is a completely made up partner area, and I just wanted to show you this because I'll be referring to this a bit later on. But I want to show you how to access the data which relates to the funeral directors who have sent who have collected money on behalf of their clients, and it's ended up with you. So if you go to the reports bit and then click on funds by referrer, and then if you set this to all, I'd say just set it to all in the first time round, and then click on download, you'll get a report, and that report will have the funeral director and the amount that they've raised. So that amount can also be handy if you're sending out certificates to say thank you. So let me stop sharing that and go back to my slides. Okay, so that's how we work with funeral directors. So it's good to have a bit of an understanding, I think, from the very beginning. So you're probably wondering why connect with funeral directors? Well, you're here, so that question is very alive, hopefully within you. So increasing awareness of your charity, building and fostering relationships. Sometimes you'll be able to spot kind of super users, so people within the funeral firm who are creating lots of tributes that are supporting you. And I always advocate this idea of treating funeral people like legacy pledges. So they are potentially a great person to nurture relationships with. And also, funeral people are often key members of their community, and their community is your community. So they're very much involved. And I think, Karen, you were at bingo last night. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to mention that, but
I was indeed. I was indeed. And I think it's much more about having a personal involvement in your community and being seen to do things than perhaps having a corporate interest in flashing your name expensively all over the local bowls club. I think personal involvement is really important. And I did win, so that was quite
success all around.
Mm.
Also, beyond kind of just funeral people, you've also got crematoria and cemetery people as well. And crematoria are often keen to be involved in their local community, and that lends itself really well, if you're a local charity to them, to perhaps offering to be involved somehow. And they also, there's this idea of, well, it's not an idea, it's a real thing, of recycling precious metals that have been recovered following cremation. And there's an organization called Ortho Metals, and I think at some point we might be able to have Ortho Metals speak with you about what they do, and the fact that you could potentially pitch for the funds that have been raised following the recycling of precious metals. So see crematoria people, cemetery people as part of the funeral people mix. And another reason to connect is the corporatality aspect. I don't think that's a real word, but the corporate aspect in the funeral people, that I think there is an appetite for them to work with charities, and also, and we'll talk a bit about this a bit later on, that actually funeral people can donate up to £250 without having to do lots of things to be compliant with the Competitions and Marketing Authority, and we'll talk later on that. There's value in an invitation even if people don't engage. So it's a bit like receiving an invite for dinner somewhere that you don't really want to go, but it's nice to be invited. So don't see, I'm saying there's value, I think, even if people don't engage in them being thought of. Help to grow in-mem income, that's a big one. For your supporters. So I believe that people have built trust in their relationships. So people will have quite intense relationships with the funeral director for, say, 10, 15 days, and there is a lot of trust there. It's mostly building relationship and working out from people what it is exactly that they want, and people don't know exactly what they want, but they need to feel safe in that relationship before getting to that point. So I like the idea of the baton of trust being passed from funeral people to you. So I think there's something in that. Okay, unpopular opinions. And I think this is my experience, especially working in the independent sector. Most funeral firms maintain environments which are free of third-party literature. So they have just the basics, and the reason that they have just the basics is because grieving people have so many decisions to make, an unbelievable amount of decisions to make, and you literally do need to create an environment which is free of lots of distraction. And there's this kind of commonly known that grieving people at times have reduced access to their prefrontal cortex. So it's difficult for people to make decisions. It's difficult for people to read small text. It's difficult for people to read long sentences when they are grieving, and that's worth remembering in your communications with grieving people, is keep sentences short. And the final point, most funeral people share information and provide options rather than recommend. So it's about offering choice. It's all about choice, and offering that choice at the right time is where the skill comes in. So I don't think funeral people will necessarily recommend. I think perhaps if someone says, oh yeah, we'll donate to this charity just because they have awareness of that charity, but in fact the person died and they loved this charity during their life, and actually another charity, a local charity, supported them when they were dying. Funeral people then, I think, might say, oh well, what about this charity, because the person was involved or because they were supported when they were dying. But I don't think funeral people will not, I don't think, actively recommend. Karen, would you agree with what?
I would agree 100%. I would say probably way over 95% of people that come to funeral directors already know what charity they are going to use. If they don't know, then they tend to say, you know, they just want to talk it over with siblings or, you know, dad, what, mum or dad. But recommending the charity isn't something that funeral directors do on an even rare basis. We may be asked if somebody wants to give a donation to, say, an arthritis charity. We may, you know, we'd always ask, is that for research or is it for general charity? But families already know in most cases which charity they are there. And just going back to what Jason was saying about third-party literature, when we're arranging a funeral, we are not there to sell. We are not trying to sell a family items. We are offering them choices on making funeral arrangements. So it's a very delicate situation.
Thank you. Another perhaps unpopular opinion, please no donation envelopes. I think I've been involved in arranging and attending over 3,000 funerals, and potentially one of the most stressful bits was working in a time restricted setting, so crematorium chapel, cemetery chapel. So when you're there, sometimes you'll have 40, 45 minutes. It's different across the country. And then you see these donation envelopes magically appear and you're not aware of them, or people don't carry pens, and I think donation envelopes are quite distracting. So people during a eulogy perhaps will start completing the gift aid. And I just think it's sad because people are taken away from being in that moment and from being present. So yeah, logistically they're tricky because people leave them on the pews, and in terms of accountability they're a bit of a nightmare. So, but I know that some charities are fond of them. Logistically, as someone from someone who was out on the roads conducting funerals, I was not a big fan of donation envelopes. And if you're wanting to build relationships with funeral people, having that awareness, understanding the logistical impact that donation envelopes can have, I think is valuable to know. And you're nodding, which is good to see, Karen.
I 100% agree. You know, you're lucky if you've got 25 minutes in a standard cremation service, half an hour to get your mourners in and out, and you simply don't have time to go in putting envelopes on pews and then collecting them up afterwards.
Yeah, you can get fined as well for overrunning, and sometimes
Yes.
the celebrant will have to cut stuff from their ceremony, so you'll see them sometimes scrubbing stuff out, which I think is quite sad because the funeral directors are so against things with time.
Yes.
That being, oh, in the previous slide I mentioned donation boxes can be a logistical nightmare too, but perhaps less of a logistical nightmare. And I've got a really nice friend called Adrienne who has a company called Canfly Marketing, and she sent me this email the other day saying that cardboard donation boxes are available at around £2.50 to £3. So there's a big obvious plug for Adrienne at Canfly Marketing, but as an alternative, donation boxes are slightly more palatable, I think. Okay, so funeral people want to do stuff with charities. There's appetite out there. So this was me doing a charity car wash on a Saturday morning, and we raised quite a bit of money. And my colleagues, it was something that they were really keen to do. So it was a bit like team building for us. And we had all of the fancy car shampoos and yeah, there's an appetite for funeral people doing stuff with charities is what I want to get across. Oh, and this was a lovely walk that we did, a bluebell walk, and some old colleagues photographed here. I really like the idea of inviting funeral people to be stewards at events like this, because funeral people are really experienced in having conversations with grieving people. It's their bread and butter. They're speaking with grieving people all the time. And I think there's something very valuable in having people at events who can ask questions about the person who's died. So people are doing this in memory of someone, and having people there, perhaps even if they're carrying cue cards, asking questions like, what was special about the person that you're walking in memory of? How would they like to be described? So funeral people are really good at that. So they would be a good addition to your team. And I think there's sponsorship opportunities as well. So it might be that they help with the catering or provide strawberries and cream, that kind of stuff. And they'd be very happy, I'm sure, to man those offerings. This is a funeral director, Henry King, who's doing a half marathon for Alzheimer's Research UK. That's another thing as well. I tend to go through Facebook to see what's going on in terms of charities and funeral directors, but it would be great if Henry could have some support going forward from the charity. So what can you offer? CPD opportunities and a Stroke Association have just come to mind, because Stroke Association have created a course which is an access communication course, and anyone can do it. However, I know that they have been speaking with the National Association of Funeral Directors as a way of offering the course to the National Association of Funeral Directors members, and actually they could have that offering converted into CPD points, so there you can add more value to it. And if there's something like that you're wanting to do, please be in touch and we can point you in the right direction. So CPD, and some of you, hospices especially, will have clinical nurse specialists who can teach things like CPR or manual handling. Most of you will have a Marcoms person who can give, say, a 20-minute presentation on using social media or what's new on social media. So there's lots of opportunity for sharing. And some of you will have in-house counselling teams, and your counsellors could talk about grief models, and it's all about sharing, and no doubt funeral people will have stuff that they can share with you too. And this video we worked out doesn't work, which is a shame. You can just hear people breathing heavily, so I won't play it. But it's a video of this event, and this is Devon Air Ambulance teaching CPR training to the Devon Area Federation of the National Association of Funeral Directors. And I think you can see Karen in the centre, and you can see me to the left. I'm the tall one. But this was a really lovely thing to do. And actually, we had this CPD verified by the National Association of Funeral Directors, so the attendants received CPD points for this. On a local level, hospices, inviting funeral people to your premises, I think, on a regular basis, so perhaps quarterly, is a good thing, because funeral people inevitably have new staff, and sharing things like your opening hours, your identification and jewelry procedures, your mortuary register protocol, pacemaker, and ICD protocols. So those are the types of things that funeral people, I think, want to know, and things like infectious disease policy. So if you're a hospice, actually be aware that there's an offering there that you can do in an organised way. What else could you offer? So I spoke about the Bluebell Walk and this idea of inviting funeral people to take part in that, to steward, to volunteer, and inviting or providing funeral people with the infrastructure so that they can promote these events for you. And then there's this idea of having a package of something to offer funeral people afterwards. So whether that's sharing with them photos from the event, I just think there needs to be something. There always needs to be something to give funeral people to share, and that might be. That could also look like you creating posts and tagging funeral people in and providing suggested copy and certificates, and we'll show you some certificates a bit later on. This video is a play called Mosquito, and it's I'll see, you might be able to hear it. I'll play it. So this video reminded me of having to kiss relatives that I didn't want to kiss in return for receiving stuff, and it's awkward and it's horrible, and I'm hoping that this reminds you that actually it doesn't need to feel awkward and horrible, but there needs to be something for funeral people. It can't just be one way. So think carefully about what you can do with funeral people as a thank you afterwards. And here's an example of a poster that a funeral director shared on social media. So I used to get really excited when I had posters, and I'd often put posters in my windows. And then this funeral director has shared a thank you letter that they've received. So, and the intention was not for this to be shared on social media. However, that's the impact it's had. A thank you has had this impact, and she's shared it. It's something that she's proud of being involved. Funeral Partners, who are a corporate firm, they've raised quite a lot of money for Greater Ormond Street Children's Hospital charity, and this is a photo of them. Okay, windows. So in my first role, we had 7 offices, and each of those offices I needed to find a new window display every quarter, and actually Charities can potentially help with that. And I know in a previous webinar I've spoken about voiles, those kind of hanging net curtains. I think Adrienne might be able to help with that, but I know that Colourful Coffins, there's a company called Colourful Coffins who have supplied foils. But if you're a charity wanting to perhaps help with funeral director window displays, then that's something that you could do. However, I'd say have a conversation with funeral people to work out what it is that they want or what it is that they would be happy to do. And here's a poster in a window near where I am. Okay, I spoke about £249, this idea of £250 being an easy amount for funeral people to be able to sponsor organisations with. There's Competitions and Marketing Authority compliance that funeral firms have to comply with. So it's anything over that, then they have to do lots of things that are quite costly. So they have to publish it in the window of their offices. And we can go through, this is a bit tedious, but we can go through this with you if you ever had any questions. But having awareness that this exists, I think is quite helpful because it shows that you've done some research. And if any of you want this, I can signpost you to this as well. Okay, events are other things that you can do, and so no doubt you'll have your own kind of meeting spaces, or you'll have a garden, and again you can ask local crematoria if you can host meetings there. Some churches have super meeting facilities, refreshments as well, so you could offer funeral people refreshments. Say if it's a trade association meeting, you can, but they do have some budget for that kind of thing. So but you can do like subsidized refreshments if you're hosting, say, a funeral director meeting at your premises. So this was a local dementia charity who came to a crematorium to deliver some training to some funeral people. Other opportunities, so Charity of the Year. So there are a few trade associations. So you've got the National Association of Funeral Directors. You've got SAFE, which I can never remember.
The Society for Allied and Independent Funeral Directors.
Brilliant. And you've also got the BIFT, the British Institute of Funeral Directors, as well. And they will have a national president each year, and that national president will have a Charity of the Year. And what's this other point here? Oh yeah, so it's a whole profession to connect with, and don't forget crematoria and cemetery people too. So this here is John Adams in the second from the left, and he was the national president for a year, and I think this is the accumulative amount that he raised whilst national president. John is actually speaking at one of our upcoming webinars, and I think Jane's going to share the link to register for that at some point. But John's going to speak for us in the future. Okay, that made up word earlier, corporatality. This is a charity near me in Somerset, and these are recruiters, they're not funeral people. But this funeral firms have teams of people who have lots of transferable skills, and I just actually you could suggest to them, why not have an away day and come and paint our ceilings for us type event. And I mentioned orthometals, this recycling of precious metals. So this is a crematorium in Richmond, and they are donating the money to a local or a charity that's special to them. Westerly Group. So Westerly Group is a large chain of crematoria, and they inevitably will be looking for different charities to work with, and that will be quite a significant job for them, finding different charities to work with. So Westerly Group are worth building relationships with, perhaps. Practicalities. So as a funeral person, I used to find that Tuesday mornings used to be the least busy time. So if you're looking to contact funeral people, Tuesday mornings tended to be quite quiet. Would you agree with that, Karen?
Yeah, Tuesday mornings, Wednesday mornings do seem to be, yeah, they're still the quietest times.
Super. November, December and January are busy times for funeral people because the death rate tends to be at its highest. So I'd avoid those months. And we use something called Doodle. So if you're ever organising events, actually, you can ask people when works for them. And I've just remembered an event that was being organised by one of our air ambulance charities, and they had like a helipad shindig where funeral people could go, and they had strawberries and cream, and they could have photos taken, and it was just, that's actually a really interesting thing for people to be involved in, because there are lots of photo opportunities. But we're now over. I want to say that the images I've used in this presentation are from the Good Funeral Guide, and they want people to use images like this that are a bit more real than the staged American casket with a perfect red rose on the top. So they want people to use their images. So please do, if you're looking for funeral images, have a nosy at the Good Funeral Guide. They just want to be mentioned. But we're now over to the Q&A bit, and I think, Jane, you might have been scanning the questions whilst we were talking.
Yeah, hi Jason. I have been answering pretty much everything as we've gone along, and I've popped links to various forthcoming webinars, etc. in there. And also someone else has just asked, a recording of the session will be available on the charity support site afterwards. Just give us a day or two to get it uploaded. But aside from that, I think I've pretty much answered all the questions.
Oh, super. I'm curious as to what the response people have is to what I said about donation envelopes. So I'm curious as to what people...
people did say that people are cautious about using technology, which is why they prefer to use the envelopes. But I think that you covered that really well when you sort of explained the time constraints that people have when you're at the crematoriums, etc. And there's a lot to be dealing with aside from putting envelopes on pews.
They can, and we always suggest if people really want envelopes that perhaps they take them to the refreshments afterwards, so they can hand them out there.
Yeah. But I think the beauty of having a MuchLoved tribute page is the fact that you can have once you've set up the page, you can have the QR code on the back of the order of service. I personally keep every order of service of every funeral I go to because I think it's kind of a mark of respect. But with the QR code on the back of the order of service, they can point their phones at it and they can take that information away and deal with the donation, after, as Jason said, you're in the moment of being at a funeral, so you can deal with it all afterwards.
And I think it's important as well because there's a lot of support. So if somebody, when Jason showed you the website, you saw that grief chat came up. Some people may need additional support or help or information. So if they're looking online, they've got access to that on the way to doing their donation as well.
Yeah, that's a good point about grief chat. And actually, our Optimum charity partners have access to grief chat as well. And I always, with my partners, talk about mentioning grief chat in your comms because you can thank and you can signpost to bereavement support, and that bereavement support in terms of grief chat is a really valuable resource.
And we make sure on our service sheets, as you were saying, that we put a link to the site, but also point out again that they can gift aid through the site, which I think is really important.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about people that I forgot to mention. Celebrants and local clergy are also very involved in their local community. So celebrants quite often seem to be keen on being involved in events. So if you're having a walk or something like that, then don't forget celebrants too, and local clergy. We used to always invite our local clergy to be involved in events, and they quite often rock up and serve coffee and that kind of thing, so they're keen to be involved.
Sorry, so I'm just trying to read the question. Somebody's asking for contact for the ortho metals, which I think somebody added earlier, so I'll just track that down and add it again.
So Hidde, the chap is called Hidde, he in the Netherlands, and if you just Google ortho metals, you'll find them because they're quite. I don't think they have much competition. I don't think there are many other.
I was just picking up on a comment from Christelle about postcards to funeral directors. So in our experience, funeral directors that work with MuchLoved, we create the tributes on behalf of our families, and then we hand them over to a family member to look after if that's what they want, which most people do. I was just picking up on the postcard question as to, is that not what people think happens? I don't know what other companies do, but most funeral directors set them up themselves.
Yeah, most funeral directors set them up themselves. There'll be in some areas where we don't have as many funeral directors. It might be that people will come to the Charities website and they'll search for funeral donations, funeral collections, and so there's an opportunity there for people to create a funeral notice themselves that way. Yeah, so there are some geographical parts where funeral directors won't be using MuchLoved, but we work really hard to reduce that, don't we, Jane?
We do.
I've seen that Katie's said about maybe worth offering some training for the FTs to know how to set up the tribute funds. Katie, that's something you could do perhaps with your the funeral directors that you can download the information from your partner area. We have an e-learning platform and we do lots of one-to-one work with with funeral people. And you can also contact Kate Walker, who's popped her email address in the chat, who's our lead trainer. But there's an opportunity for you, if you're looking to connect with funeral people, then actually going through step by step how to do it, they might be more receptive to you going through with them, perhaps.
Can I just pick up on the GDPR point?
Thanks, Karen.
So we have GDPR forms. So when we arrange a funeral, we have to get an agreement signed at the time, and our GDPR covers our MuchLoved tribute site. It sets out what the percentages are in our terms and conditions, and it also has the social media GDPR on there. And I think most funeral directors have something along that line in place.
Yeah, thanks, Karen.
Oh, can I pick up on an unknown user? Are you finding that providing the option to donate online or via QR code at the funerals has reduced the number or value of donations? We actually hosted a webinar recently where 2 of the members of East of England Co-op, wasn't it, Jason? Who only do their donations through the MuchLoved pages, and they said that they actually found that the donations were higher because the donations were made with intent, and they found that it increased the amount.
I'd agree with that, but I do think that since COVID there has been a reduction in donations across the board. We're not seeing the level of donations that we did 10 years ago. I think people just don't have the money to donate anymore.
And Gemma, I know that you had your question missed in the last webinar, and so I'll read it. Do you recommend having flyers information at the service? I do get asked this. So do you recommend having flyers information at the service? So my initial response is no, because it's very much about the family, the person who's died. So the fewer distractions, the better. What are your thoughts, Karen?
It's a little bit the same with donation envelopes. You've got a very small window of time to get people in, have the service that they want, and then move those people out. I mean, Jason referred the other time to being fined. A couple of weeks ago, I was at a crematorium where if you go over time and the celebrant did have to miss something out, it's a £400 instant fine. So it's trying to find that time where you would give those leaflets out. And some people like the family to be in the service before the coffin is brought in, and you have that situation where you've got people going in, you've got bits of paper handed out, and you've then got to clear the chapel before the next service as well. But more than that, I agree with the distraction theory that Jason said, that it's about that person at that time.
I just had a flashback of scooping up soggy tissues.
Yes.
And because I think most funeral people are really respectful of trying to clear the space as quickly as they can, and you scoop up lots of different things to get it ready for the next family, because the next family is as important.
Can I just ask, Karen, Imogen has asked, she's explained that when they found out about their donations, they thank the families, etc. And she's saying, do the funeral directors appreciate being thanked for setting up the pages?
No.
Okay.
I would see that as part of something that we can offer to families. I wouldn't expect to be thanked for doing that.
Okay.
And if you can imagine, some firms are setting up a lot of tributes, that could be a lot of traffic, but families do appreciate a thank you for remembering a charity.
Okay, great.
Just having a quick nosy to see if we've missed anything else.
So just going back to that comment about thank yous, quite often it's a central person in, say, one office who will set up all of the tributes. So in effect, you're thanking the same person again and again. It may not be making its way through to the person who's arranging or looking after that family.
Okay, and just further to that, one of the charities has asked, Do you appreciate an email confirming we've received your physical donations in the post, which I would assume would be a cheque?
So we always request, if it's a cheque or back, we're moving to, we've moved to backs payments to charities as much as possible. We always request a receipt for that, because otherwise, I mean, we do not know that it has made it, although we do reconcile our charity bank account on a weekly basis. But more importantly, when you receive the donations from the online tribute, it would be really helpful if families could be thanked for those, because that doesn't always happen, and is probably the main response that we get is, has the charity received the online donations, because they don't get a thank you from all charities.
Yeah.
That's a really big takeaway. Thank you, Karen. Hannah, you asked about the metal recycling scheme only available to certain charities, and you being a wildlife charity. So I think it's about building a relationship with your local crematorium or a crematorium and saying, look, we really appreciate this. And actually, the irony is that recycling of precious metals and crematoria are moving towards being as environmentally friendly as possible. And wildlife, the local ecology is very much part of that. So I would say give it another go, because wildlife charities, it would make sense for you to be supported.
Jason, there is a question from Claire at Maidstone and Tunbridge Wells. I asked about CPD registration for events for funeral directors. How do we go about doing this?
Yeah, Clara, I saw your question, and Maidstone is where I started off as a funeral director. So that photo is Knight Rider Street in Maidstone, which you'll probably know. But I don't really understand your question. I'm now thinking that actually, if you wanted CPD to be recognised and allocated CPD points for, then you could forward it to me and I can forward it to the National Association of Funeral Directors, perhaps, or to SAFE. I think that might be what you were referring to. And then Charlotte's asking about appropriate images that aren't stock photos. It's really difficult to find appropriate images. I can't think of anywhere else.
There are some alternative ones on Canva.
Oh, are there?
Because they've got this new AI imaging suite, which is included in the free one as well. So I found some different images, not always suitable. But...
And Gemma, you've asked who pays the fines when you run over.
So that depends. If you have a good celebrant, they will tell the family some time restrictions, maybe, or not necessarily restrictions, but ask them to keep perhaps a eulogy to a certain length, and they will cut things out. But many celebrants and ministers will say that that fine is down to the family because it's not their fault. The funeral director is the one who actually receives the fine, though.
And then the funeral director has to invoice the family for it potentially. So it's the family that would,
depending on what the delay is. But if you have an unexpectedly large congregation, it can be very difficult to manage that and have to cut things out of the service.
So I think we're almost at the 45-minute mark. So we're on time. Unless there's anything else question-wise, I think we'll begin to say goodbyes.